views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. As you know, BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and editors, and journalists, filmmakers, photographers, music historians, and I say that advisedly because that's what we're going to do in the second part of our show. And we are really thrilled to go up to Albany with a flip of a switch and say good evening to our buddy Zach Williams, who is the senior state politics reporter for City and State New York. Nice to see you, Zach.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled that you cleared out the state capitol so we could do this interview. I greatly appreciate it. Anyway, I do want to tell people this has been a lot of people have texted me and emailed and said, hey, Gary, we're going to talk about redistricting on the show. And it's a very complicated issue, but it's a very important one because now you're going to have different representation in some cases in the Bronx. And of course, there's all kinds of political discussions going on about what happened. So before we get into these districts that I can't deny made me laugh this morning because Zach described the 16th Congressional District to be a bulging bearded head. Let's talk about the process. Was not your usual, hey, let's get together and make some districts. It really went through a couple of generations, didn't it?
Call it politics, Gary. What can I say? Let me just apologize. Heads up. I'm kneeling right here in the state capitol, so if I wiggle around, sorry to the viewers. I'll try to keep you from getting seasick here. But yes, the redistricting process, that's every 10 years, they redraw the maps for state Senate, Assembly, and Congress. And I think what you've seen this year is a well-intentioned effort to do this in a more fair way than in the past through what's called an independent redistricting commission. Just fell flat on its face. You know, its members were appointed by Republicans and Democrats, and unfortunately they deadlocked on reaching a coherent plan for redrawing the maps, leaving it to state lawmakers. And in Albany, where Democrats control everything, that means there was no shortage of people looking to take full partisan advantage of the process. And what that means for people in the Bronx, I think by and large, is especially dramatic on the congressional map. You know, you have like freshman incumbent Jamal Bowman, who currently represents a pretty significant portion of the Bronx. His district is being pushed northward into past Westchester into Putnam County. So that means he's going to be representing a lot fewer Bronxites and more suburban voters, which really could challenge him at the polls. He's been one of the most progressive members of the House, especially in the state delegation. And now he's really got to watch his right flank where a more moderate Democrat could emerge in the upcoming primary. I think we're seeing something that was...
So I was going to say that there are so many of these, and we'll break down the districts. I wanted to go back to the process and something that you had said about so Democrats took full advantage, and we can examine that. But the fact is, it was the Republicans, when they controlled the state legislature, who created this system. And so, you know, it's almost like the whole dialogue about the filibuster said, you know, you better watch what you might regret what you ultimately put out. And now the Republicans are saying it's unfair. But, you know, putting the thing or potentially putting it in the hands of the state legislature is what they kind of wanted when they were in charge, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Well, it's kind of funny how political parties say different things in different states when they're in different situations. And the Republicans, who used to have control of the state Senate, you know, had a big role in redistricting 10 years ago. They don't have that anymore. Now the Democrats have a supermajority in both chambers of the state legislature. So what you see now is a lot of Republicans crying foul on a redistricting process that they themselves had a big role in creating. That is this independent redistricting commission that really is kind of named mistakenly. It's really a bipartisan redistricting commission. commissioners, half appointed by Democrats, half by Republicans. And if they couldn't reach a deal, then the state constitutional amendment in 2014 says that the state legislature has to step up, draw the maps themselves. And if they get approved by 2/3 of both chambers, they can stand. And that's exactly what happened.
So let's get back to Jamal Bowman's district. I know I'm going to read the quote again, bulging bearded head, as it was created, as it was crafted. So if Rebecca can pull that up, the 16th Congressional District, we can look at it. That's a fascinating thing. And you say, well, Democrats created it. It sounds or looks to me like moderate Democrats created it, because obviously Jamal Bowman is a left-wing politician, so to speak. I saw an article somewhere where he said, don't call me progressive, okay. But now, as you said, he's up there in Somers and Yorktown, all the way up to Putnam Valley. It starts to get red up there, right?
Well, it's he has not always been the greatest ally of the party establishment. So it's easy to look for conspiracies or backroom deals. Who knows? They haven't told me what's going on, the people that do these maps. We only know what people say in public. But that said, I think there is an interesting phenomenon where in redistricting in New York, Democrats have chosen to really try to create as many competitive districts as possible, minimizing the safe Republican districts, but also leaving some of their incumbents vulnerable in either a primary or general election. So you have Jamal Bowman, whose district used to be, or is currently very left-leaning, becoming a little bit more moderate through redistricting. But we're also seeing current Republican-held seats that are going from pretty right-leaning to very competitive for the Democrats in the 2022 cycle. So I doubt Jamal Bowman earned himself many favors from the party establishment in redistricting, but there's a grander strategy at play that is all about Democrats trying to maximize their chances of keeping control of the U.S. House in these midterm elections.
And if you examine the way you just described it, you could interpret that on some levels as saying, well, the Democrats, they were balanced in a way. In other words, they took a left-handed politician and kind of nudged him a little bit to the right. I want to talk about the Richie Torres district, which is also a fascinating thing. Of course, historically, Jose Serrano held that seat in the 15th, and it was a South Bronx seat. It was, and again, Rebecca, if you could put that 15th up there, it was the poorest congressional district in the nation. Now, as you can see, it's kind of got a claw hook. I'm waiting to hear how Zach decides to interpret that. But it's got a claw.
Well, that's
that goes up to Riverdale.
That's an interesting one. And I was wondering the same thing itself. We go from this district that's very compact in the South Bronx, almost circular, at least as far as congressional districts go. And now it's got all this part of Riverdale. And you got to keep in mind that Richie Torres has been very pro-Israel. And there's a very significant Jewish constituency in the Northwest Bronx. That might have been on the mind of some map makers when they thought, where are we going to add a little bit of space to Richie Torres's current district? You got to remember, we're going from 27 to 26 congressional districts following the US Census. So everyone's district has to take a little bit more land. And in the case of, Richie Torres's district, they added an area that just so happens to have predominance of voters that might just like his stance on Israel.
The concern that I've heard from many different corners of the South Bronx is now we won't get the attention that we need. Now we won't get the resources that we need for things like housing and food justice and all these other issues that they fight for all the time, because they're going to say, hey, look at the economy or look at the income level. It's balanced out by the richest, frankly, the wealthiest people in the borough of the Bronx.
Well, keep in mind, there are some legal challenges against both the legislative and the congressional maps. And one of the best ways to challenge a redistricting map is under the Voting Rights Act from 1965, I believe, which really protects what are called minority-majority districts. Under the Voting Rights Act, if you have a district that's currently, say, predominantly African-American or predominantly Jewish or predominantly any type of demographic where this represents a particular opportunity for them to elect one of their own to Congress, then depriving of them of that can be legal grounds for actually challenging a congressional map. And that's one reason why Jerry Nadler's district is so crazy, weaving together all these Jewish communities in Brooklyn and Manhattan.
The first one I remember in the Bronx was when Guy Villela was at the 34th Senatorial District, and they said it looked like a lobster, the way it went from the East Bronx over, skipped over the Central Bronx. Well, let's see. Of course, getting people what they're due and making them have to sue for it is probably not the best thing. The last one I want to look at is the one that's the third a congressional district, and Senator Alessandra Biaggi has already said she wants to run. What I find so disturbing is that all Bronx neighborhoods are important, but all those neighborhoods in the East Bronx and City Island and Pelham Bay and Throgs Neck, those are all going to be a minor part of the district. And Long Island, which is going to make enough noise, is going to be the bulk of it. I feel like people in the East Bronx are, when it comes time to get shoreline support or things like that to protect against environmental disasters, I'm concerned. Let's put it as a Bronxite.
That's a really interesting one. Again, congressional districts, have to be centered on what are called communities of interest. Kind of like what I mentioned with minority-majority districts. In this case, with the current New York Congressional District 3, currently represented by Tom Suozzi, who's running for governor and is not running for re-election, what they're doing is taking a congressional district that's almost all in Nassau, and Suffolk County has a little bit of Queens too. And they're actually linking that with the waterfront of the East Bronx and parts of Westchester, claiming that this will be a kind of a Long Island Sound district. Now, Biaggi, who's a state senator in the Bronx and Westchester right now, just so happens to live within this district, which gives her a little bit of an extra boost in running for it. Keep in mind, members of Congress, unlike members of the legislature, do not actually need to live in their districts.
We're going to conclude this now. I think we need to do. Having said that, the Republicans are challenging this in the courts. All the analysis seems to be that it won't work, but I mean, who knows? I guess that would be the bottom line. So anyway, Zach Williams, he's the senior state reporter for City and State New York. This dialogue is going to go on, and we hope it's going to include you because you're the best. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and sorry again for bouncing all around up here in the state.
You're all right. You're all right. And let's thank our senators and assembly members for closing down the state senate so we could do this interview. We really appreciate it.
Anything for you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, say hello to all our buddies over there at City and State New York. What a great job you do. And we'll take a short break. When we come back, the world's great hip hop photographer, you know who I'm talking about, and his father will be joining us. Don't go away.